Hi there, Kawhi here. The day of making this video is the 15th of April. It's been about 6 months since Mages received meaningful changes. These are in the form of talent swaps, certain talents becoming baseline or straight up reworking them. Sadly, Mages, they need a lot of more love. Currently we're experiencing a mass exodus in terms of people rerolling, better damage, more fireball builds in different specs, compared to being hard stuck one build per mage spec or just straight up abandoning it. It's not receiving any changes in 10.1, which will be out in less than a month. Before we start, thank you guys for watching. I don't want to make these kind of videos, but mages definitely need some love. First, let's talk why Blizzard killed mages. The first reason is going to be due to the prevalency of mages so far in Dragonflight. If you look at Fire Mage, it was used during the MDI in many comps. Currently it's pushing some of the highest keys possible on the ladder, visible on Raider.io. Mage also dominated Vault of the Incarnates at lower item levels. Many Raise the World First comps were using two mages, some of them even two Arcane Mages. This was primarily pre-Storm Surge or the Datia add HP nerfs. Arcane could easily do 10 to 20% more DPS in those scenarios. Meanwhile, Frostmage, the MILF build, is actually the best single target mage spec on bosses like Terros, really good. Sustained cleave like Kurok, also amazing. Not to mention it being excellent when ton of small ads spawn, stuff like Senard for orb resets and in general padding. Not much of a PvP enjoyer, but the team in the recent finals, they also played Frostmage. Fundamentally redesigning a class that is seeing ton of use in all type of content at the highest or lowest level is probably their primary reasoning for not touching the class. So let's talk about the second reason then, why Blizzard decided to kill mages with no changes. In Dragonflight 10, or not in Dragonflight 10.1, but in 10.0, there was a new battle mage spec. It's called the Devastation Evoker. Of course, I mean Blizzard wants to try get people to play the spec, potentially main the spec, but this pathetic lizard, it has given some budget, time and effort of course, which I'm all for, you know. I mean, making the game better by adding more race options, it's great. In my opinion, it's fairly naive and hopeful to think as well as a noble cause nonetheless. However, one way to kill a class is to just abandon it. Yeah, I mean, just not cooking mage and spending resources on a new shiny toy. Of course, I mean, you want people to play it, but at the same time, it's very, how do I put it, disheartening to see the amount of changes to a spec with amount, and then you look at mage, where there's like two or three, maybe even 5, 6 lines of text, and then that is all, compared to something like maybe Devastation Evoker, and that is getting like at least like, I don't know, like 20 or 30 lines of text that are positive, let's say. I mean, the mage ones, they're not, let's just say, all the lines are not positive. So it might seem on paper that all the mage specs, they're doing great, but each spec still has their fundamental issues. Before talking about each mage spec, let's talk about the general tree and some issues that have been prevalent since beta actually.
Good nodes, probably like 8 to 10 on this tree that you actually want, and you have to just swim through piss to get it all. Is the way I'd put it.
Yes, I think that's accurate description of the general tree.
So the general tree. For me, I share the sentiment that our tree is fundamentally flawed. When scrolling the Mage Discord and typing in general tree, you are bombarded with people's disdain for the general tree. However, this comment probably summarized it all. The general tree is largely irrelevant. Only the DPS nodes like Rune of Power, Double Lost, Shifting Power, only those are relevant. Sure, we have cool utility spells like Mass Poly, Energize Barrier, many others. But that's in theory. The reality is that they're utterly useless utility spells that see the light of day 0.1% of the time, as their use in situation can only be described as niche at best. So we're still locked into DPS capstones. Instead, during beta even, people were saying put defensives as capstones. Currently, Mage is tuned, every Mage, around Double Lost, Shifting Power. Two mandatory DPS options. In my opinion, it's better to retire these capstones and to just put defensive options. I mean, you don't have a genius to be this, to saying this. Just by removing these capstones, you would have like a Frost Mage, for instance, with Cauterize and Cold Snap, or you could have Arcane Mages with greater invisibility and Cauterize, stuff like that. That would be more, I would say, intuitive for mages, instead of having every single mage spec choose Shifting Power and Double Lust. No variation, 10 out of 10, all of them choose the same. I mean, it's really boring and um, quite sad to say the least. Let's talk about the Fire Mage tree. Oh boy. So there are 29 out of 30 predetermined talents. So this is a main problem. There's only one build and it's one talent choice. It's between Cauterize or the Call of the Sun King. You get 2% more mastery. I mean, it's an amazing choice, right? And that's the only choice you have as a Fire Mage. Perhaps it's good before we start roasting the developers and to ask them, why do you have only one viable build? How is the entire right side of the Fire Mage tree utterly useless in all types of content? I mean, even in low level keys, you would maybe play the right side of the build with some some flame strike spam. It is still not viable. I mean, it's not even viable. It's just clunky. Flame strike should have been reworked in 10.0. It didn't, and it sucks. It's not getting changes. It's still gonna suck. That's what it is. To call Fire Mage unscuffed Frankenstein spec is a compliment. The current Pyroclasm, it's the Legion Legendary Wrist. Temporal Warp added, it's another Legion Legendary. Feel the Burn is Blaster Master 2.0 and Fevered Flickering is a budget minor Lucid Essence from BFA. Sunken Blessing from BFA similar, as well as the Fiery Rush tier set from Sepulchre. The list is endless. It's very apparent that Fire Mage has been abandoned. There is no cohesion, it's just a shitty mess that's designed around, tuned around, and even worse, just straight up barely fun. Barely fun to play. And it's less than a month. And we're going into 10.1, the new raid Aberrus. And we get a new tier set. So let's discuss how much this new tier set will fuck up your rotation. So not only in a raid or in a Mythic Plus scenario, we're having to min-max FT or SE hot streaks required for SKB alignments. It's natural. But now you're also tuned and reliant on maintaining the Charred Embers tier set debuff. Whether that's single target or AoE, it's reliant on having that debuff uptime. This is okay, I don't mind it. However, if the debuff is not up before your combustion, and this is primarily also your SKB included, you're fucked. You're absolutely shambled. I mean, the rotation is just gonna be an absolute nightmare. So what probably is gonna happen is it will become the most complex range spec in 10.1 by a mile. I mean, you have to use multiple spells within one global to maintain multiple maintenance buffs. You also need to plan ahead with your empowered Phoenix Flames to not overcap within your normal combustion rotation. All of that you're doing, and you're barely beating the tank. I mean, congratulations, there it is. But fortunately, fire is not the worst. Let's talk about Arcane then. I guess it's time to roast the Arcane Mage dev. Not only do we have a stat scaling issue, we have aggro issues still prevalent in Mythic Plus. And within our cooldowns, we cannot use more than one defensive or utility spell unless we're doing like during Lust. While there are two viable options, Arcane Harmony in its current state will be unplayable in 10.1 unless somehow magically a new rotation is discovered. Concentration makes Arcane Missiles cost no mana, therefore it's contradicting with our tier set. Unless people are gonna cancel Aura Macro the concentration buff, doing this sounds extremely inefficient, especially during Mythic progression, and it doesn't even do good damage even. But let us get ourselves. The mana build, it also has fundamental flaws, contradicting to the playstyle and other things. For instance, Mana Gem, it's still not a buff, you still have it as an item. randomly during progression. You have to cancel macro aura or delete macro something to refill your charges unless you want to open up your bags during progression or any kind of content and you want to select your mana gem, delete it and then recast it. For some reason, it's been too complex for these boomer developers without any talent to change that. Don't ask me why, it's not up to me. However, it's gonna be more than fine. The upcoming tier set makes Arcane Mage F tier. You don't have to play it. Totally fine. In M+, Arcane was already Swamp tier. It's gonna be still Swamp tier. Arcane will probably also be useless in raiding, unless they get a full talent reshuffle or rework to fix the stat scaling with Arcane Harmony, or get a 15% aura buff and a tier set rework. Arcane Mage is in the dumpsters. You don't even have to play it. Praise the Lord. Let's talk about Frost Mage then. Frost Mage, unlike Arcane Mage and Fire Mage, has been an unsung W for Blizzard. Compared to Shadowlands Season 1, Frost Mage was gutted the week before Castle Natria. It had to receive multiple aura buffs, it was still dogshit. This tier it only needed 2 aura buffs. Only 2 and it became viable. So Frost Mage is probably by far the most easiest to play mage spec, also in Mythic Plus, and it's continuing to be the most accessible mage spec for beginner players. You know, personally I love Ice Flows on Frost Mage, but sadly when looking at the raids, specifically the MILF build, it's something that Blizzard is trying to combat. Recently the nerfs to the tier set, they have made it so that you are less inclined to play it, but it's still the best build. So Blizzard will lose that battle unless they get a talent reshuffle. The spec will be milfing all the way to the bank. In my opinion, what Frost needs is an Icelands buff, incentivize Icelands build more true talents. I'm sure spamming Frostbolts with the MILF build is probably not the way to move forward. All of these things lead to the mage population dwindling. However, Blizzard has the chance to revive the class with some actual non-aura changes. So until then, let's continue sipping some copium.